In one of the most highly sought after interpretations in the entire Bible, Babylonian King Nebuchadnezzar had a frightening dream of which only the prophet Daniel was able to interpret. Could real science provide us with some clues to a much deeper and more profound explanation of this story within the Old Testament's book of Daniel? Find out next on this episode of Decode Your Reality. And hello everyone, welcome once again. My name is Logan. This is Decode Your Reality. And today we're doing one on the ancient King Nebuchadnezzar from the Babylonian times as outlined in the most cited book of Daniel, the Old Testament we're going to refer to today. And we're going to be talking about King Nebuchadnezzar and, the reigning king over Babylon at the time. He had the longest reign in Babylon. King Nebuchadnezzar, and Daniel was the man who he called upon to interpret his dream. And this, of course, if you've read Daniel chapter 2 and whatnot, you know that this is kind of the rendition. This is an artist's rendition by Bruce Long here, but this is a really good one outlining what the image looked like in Nebuchadnezzar's dream. And you'll notice all these bullet points. The head was made of gold, the chest was made of silver, the midsection was made of bronze or brass, the legs were made of iron, and then the feet and toes, which, if you understand anything about prophecy and theology, you know that a lot of people say we're living in these times right here where the feet and toes are made of iron and clay, more importantly potter's clay. That's what it references in Daniel. So when we go to Daniel chapter 2, I'm using the King James Version. It doesn't matter which version you use, by the way. It's all going to be the same. It's just the wording's going to be differently. So just keep that in mind. Now, specifically in verse 32 and 33, which is right here, this talks about the elements that we have right here. The head made of gold, chest made of silver, bronze, midsection, legs of iron, feet of iron and clay. And I had mentioned potter's clay, and that's because you'll notice in verse 41, they specifically say part of potter's clay and part of iron. That's the feet right here. And what does that mean? What do these elements mean? And I'm here to tell you that this has everything to do with the elements of the International Periodic Table. We're going to bring real science into this and show you using the elements right here. And we're going to get into all that kind of stuff. Numerology plays a role, as well. But, let's kind of get started with this here. Nebuchadnezzar, again, if we go and bring him out here, his reign was from 605 to 562 BC. That really doesn't matter as much as the dream. The dream is really where it's at. And this is really the graph of the dream, another rendition, and then, of course, the labeling of all these pieces. And then I've taken the liberty of putting the elements and lining them up in alignment with this statue of the image that he saw. Gold, the 79th, matching up with the head. Silver, matching up with the chest and arms. Copper, matching up with the belly and thighs. Brass. Now, copper, can we say copper's brass? Well, it's in the same color family, but there's a very specific reason why I believe it's the element copper that represents the belly and thighs, which would be the Macedonian kingdoms. And then, of course, the legs, which would represent Rome, and that would be iron, the 26th element. And then, of course, the feet made of iron and potter's clay, and the 10 toes making up perhaps the 10 kingdoms. But there's a reason why I chose calcium. Now, keep in mind, what are our bones made up of? Primarily calcium, a lot of calcium. And when you look at this on the chart, and I'm going to show you right here in this chart, we're going to get into that. This makes all the perfect sense of this exact dream. And it's interesting because this thing didn't come out till the 1700s, and this book that we read from supposedly is thousands of years old. How do these things match up the way they do when one was written long before the other, or discovered? And I think it's because everything has to do with the divine. This whole story, these allegories, whether they are real or not, They're all divinely inspired. They have to be. There's no other logical explanation, especially when you start to bring science into this. Measuring these atomic weights, these personalities of these elements. These have a lot to do with decoding, and if you're not using these in your decoding aspects, you're missing a huge integral part of really understanding how our matrix reality works. But anyway, what I thought was interesting is the elements in numerology: gold, silver, brass, iron, and of course I use potter's clay and iron because, again, I specifically said in the book of Daniel it mentions potter's clay. And I thought this was interesting. You know, this is just my opinion, my expressions. Doesn't mean it's true, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just showing you something to maybe for you to take a further look at to see what you see. You know, because I see what I see. What do you see? But the interesting part is, you know, a standout here, it's 34 letters and 7 words. Could be the 77. That has strong significance to it if that is true. And then, of course, the 119 or the 911 in the mirror. That's pretty important if you look at that. Like, we press 911 on the phone for emergencies. A lot of things happen on September 11th. You know, 9/11 is encoded in so much of the occult. I thought this was rather interesting. I mean, you know, what are the odds of this kind of adding up this way? We could take the word potters out and get a different aspect, but I mean, look at what potters equals. 33. And I mean, it's not the end-all number, but, you know, if you know the relevance of the number 33, you understand how important it is. Now, looking at this interpretation, Daniel explained to King Nebuchadnezzar that the 4 elements represented 4 kingdoms, and then Babylon was the very first one. This is, you know, Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom, Babylon, the gold. And if you get into Vedic aspects, you have the yugas, and this would be the golden age. And then as we transcend down, we lose touch with the reality, and we become more and more animal-like as we descend down this image. And then once we get to this part here, the feet, we become in a much animalistic state. And it's interesting because the story of Nebuchadnezzar, he ended up going out into the wilderness and becoming an animal. And I think that story is about us. We become an animal when we go through the flash of creation. Anyways, the story goes on to say that there was a stone not made of man that ended up destroying the feet, which is right here. This stone ended up coming and crashing down and smashing the feet because they were made of clay and iron, and then, of course, dropping this entire image to the ground and making it a pile of a mountain. It was a mountain that was signified. It would be a kingdom that would be established, that would be never to be destroyed. And, of course, there's a lot of that in Revelation and Matthew, and Jesus talked about it in the Sermon on the Mount. Interestingly enough, the word mountains used in the Bible many times, look what it equals. The number 33, again, matching up with the word potters. It's kind of interesting, really, because mountain signifies something established that will never be broken down, and that's a 33. And in numerology, the number 3 is our mental mind. It's where our creative mind works. That's where we think of all of our ideas, the creative aspects. It's where we communicate with our minds. A double 3 would just magnify that power. You know, the 33rd element on the periodic table is arsenic, which has an atomic weight of 74, which is an 11. Arsenic is toxic in, you know, small dosages. A lot of people get poisoned by arsenic. It's really interesting when you look at the contrasts of these things. But I'm telling you, these elements right here, I can guarantee you, this is just my opinion again, but I guarantee you this is exactly the way it is. I know for sure that calcium is representing the feet on this image, and this, like I said, they're saying prophecy-wise we're living in these times. This is our bones right here. This is the last aspect of us before we incarnate into an animal onto this planet in this living hell that we live in. Because we came from heaven, we went down to hell. That's kind of how I see it. So, you know, this right here, this whole chart, as I mentioned to you, has everything to do with our very makeup. This is about alchemy, and that's all of the spoken word, and this is all what magic is about, is alchemy. But you'll notice that, you know, there's specific elements that are tied to this image, and they're right here. And I'm going to get into that as we go further into this, because here's gold right here, gold, silver, and copper, you know, brass. So it just goes right up the ladder from bottom to top. And we're going to get into that. Now, the interesting part about the word stone, because it mentions that in the book of Daniel, the stone, let me just type it in here to get an actual reference. But stone is right here. See, a stone was cut out without hands, and it smote the image upon his feet and broke it to pieces. Verse 34. And that's what we see right here. This is an author's rendition of that. But the interesting part is stone equals 20. Stone equals 24 in numerology. And when you break down the numbers separately, you have the element helium and beryllium, the second and the fourth, 24. You add these up, you get the number 13. And the interesting part is, 13 in the Last Supper. You've seen the video I decoded with that. There was 13 guys at the table. Jesus was in the very middle. 13 is a very important number in the occult. Extremely important. And that's the death card in the tarot. And, I put this here, thought this was interesting, Maybe this has no meaning to it, but look at what death means. I mean, this is the death of this image, the death of all these kingdoms. Could this be what it really means when we use multiple expressions, multiple modalities? Quite possibly could be. Now, keep in mind, too, the 24th element is chromium right here. And what I thought really was interesting is magnesium is the 12th element, but it has an atomic weight of 24. So there's multiple meanings in these things, and I believe that the King Solomon's Temple in the Book of Kings and 2 Chronicles, there's 12 aspects, there's 12 elements in there, and it ends in magnesium. And again, this is where the hangman would go right here. The hangman would be the 12th card, and then of course death would be here. I mean, is this why it kind of fits, the hangman going right here, and then death, and then we move on to the next level. It's really, really interesting, but 12 is a very important number. 12 zodiac signs, 12 tribes of Judah. 13 is the number of death, because after 12 we end up moving into a different realm of being. So is this relevant to this graph? I don't know, but I'm just showing you. What do you see? What do you think? Now, Daniel was the guy that interpreted the dream, as we all know. I thought it was really interesting because Daniel in numerology equals the number 19, and the 19th card in the tarot is the Sun card. Very, really predominant card when it comes to lining up with what this guy did, if this was a guy at all. I mean, the Sun card, the 19th card, that's Daniel. Can you see maybe where that story kind of links up with this? Now, underneath it all, Daniel's a 2-syllable word. I believe that to get a really good further description of these words, we need to break them down into syllables. That's how they roll off our lips. Daniel. And it's a 10 and a 9, and you have neon and fluorine, the 10th and 9th element. And when you add these up, you get the number 39. Now, interestingly, the 19th element being potassium, which is linked to the 19th being the Sun card, it has an atomic weight of 39. So you look at these things and you link them up and you're like, man, is this a possibility? Is this the reality that we're seeing here? Is this how it's supposed to be expressed? Is this telling us something? Is this the divine telling us something? Because it's telling us a story with all these things. And I think, in my opinion, I think this is really defining how our reality works. Using these modalities, numerology, tarot, science, numbers, mathematics. God speaks to us in numbers. The numbers are speaking to us right here. I thought this was really fitting right here. Moving along, Daniel, of course, his accomplishments. He was supposedly a Jewish scholar, master interpreter of dreams, of course. But I'm going to get to the last point of this because I think it really hit home for me on why I think the Bible is full of contradictions. But he was famous for successfully interpreting the writing on the wall. I'm going to do a different video on that because that one blew me away. The writing on the wall, that equals the number 77, the words in Jewish language. It's really, really interesting. So this was King Nebuchadnezzar after he ended up acknowledging the God of Daniel, which is the Tetragrammaton. And the story says he ended up going out into the wilderness and becoming like a beast. Now, does that mean that when we come down, and we go into this incarnation right here, calcium bones, in here, I mean, this is I should say 1 through 12 is, but that is King Solomon's temple. And is this hell? Is this the hell that we're in? These elements, I mean, oxygen's right here. So, I mean, the animalistic state, when we incarnate, we turn into animals. We turn into animals, do we not? We have animalistic traits. I mean, we're not down on all fours like that, but I can say that, at times we become animals. And is this another part of the allegory, the story? I'd like to think so, that this is just telling us this is what we become. We become animals. When we incarnate, go through the flash of creation, as Kabbalah puts it. Now Nebuchadnezzar in numerology is a 58. Now, I wanted to break this down. It was a lot of information. I didn't want to kind of get too in-depth, but the 5 and the 8, we can break down the 5th element of boron, the 8th element of oxygen, break those down and get into some nitty-gritty on there. But I thought this was interesting. 58 is the numerology of Nebuchadnezzar, and the nickel, the 28th element, has an atomic weight of 58. And, the 28th element matches up with that of Lucifer. Lucifer equals 28. Now, I want to digress. I'm not saying anything bad about Lucifer. I'm just presenting this information. Whatever you do with it, you do with it. I'm just showing you possibilities. I'm not saying that it's true. Okay? I'm just showing you possibilities. But Lucifer equals 28. And the interesting part about his name is when you break it down in atomic weights, 9, 4, 15, it comes up to the number 58, which of course ends up matching up with nickel. And, I think that's where Old Saint Nick may have come from. Santa Claus, Old Saint Nick. 58. I mean, what do you see here? Come on. 58. It's a really good possibility that this is how it works, and Nebuchadnezzar could be tied into this in a big way, I think, when we start to break this thing down. Now, getting into the elements. Now, I know I'm kind of digressing a little bit, and I'm going to get into the chart here. Now, I want you to notice one thing, and that is the element 111, rhodogenium. And this element, I believe, could be the starting point of where we came from. Now, I say that because it's in line with Daniel's interpretation of Nebuchadnezzar's vision. Now, rhodogenium, interestingly, has a numerology of 47. If you know anything about the 47 in the occult, it's a massive number. The word Washington, D.C., Georgetown University equals 47. White House equals 47. There's a reason why, ladies and gentlemen, they like the number 47. Just so happens this element, the 111th element, is the number 47. Thought that was interesting. I just threw this in there for good measure. 280 is the average atomic weight right there. We drop the 0, we get the 28. It's rather interesting to say the least. Now, I bring that element into this because if you remember, and I'm going to go to this right here. If you remember, I showed you the image in Nebuchadnezzar's dream. It was gold as the head, silver as the chest, copper or bronze as the midsection, and then the iron, the legs of iron, which is this element right here. So what happens is I believe we quite possibly could start off right here, the 111. Now 11 we all know is the number of magic. It's the alternating current. If you look at the number 11 as a graph, as a symbol, it could be the energy going up, the energy coming down. 2 lightning rods. Now you got 3 of those. What does that mean to you? Well, keep in mind, this is a 47. 47 matches up with titanium because titanium has an atomic weight of 47. It just so happens to be the 22nd element. There's some connections right here. Now, the interesting part is that when we connect this and we make a dog leg over to the left, I believe it's possible that we start off here as electrical current, as electricity, as energy, and we end up shooting up. This is the kingdom here, again, and then we make a dog leg to the left. We have iron right here, the 26th element. This is Rome, and then we make our way down to calcium, the clay. This makes a lot of sense if you look at it this way. Now, on the left of calcium is the sun. It's potassium, the 19th element. And then on the right of calcium is Saturn's element, scandium, which is the 21st. It has an atomic weight of 44, by the way, a master number 44. This is the world card in the tarot. Now, if my calculations are right, if my theory is right, we sit right in the middle of the black sun and the white sun. And we're right in the middle. The gray, the clay. Gray, clay. Look at calcium and clay. They both share the C as the first letter of their word. I thought that was really interesting. And then, of course, we disperse through the flash of creation, and we end up becoming all these elements, and we become the animal that Nebuchadnezzar became. This is what we become when we go down the elements and we move in through the flash of creation. Now, the interesting part about this as well, it has an opposite end, and that is if you go to the right, we move all the way to the element Krypton. And remember, this is where Superman is from. Krypton. 36th element right here. And this has an atomic weight of 83, which is an 11. So it's really interesting right there. You have arsenic, the 33rd element. This is a massive number as well when you tie it into the occult. You have germanium. This has an atomic weight of 72, the 72 names of God. And then you have gallium. This one right here, this has an atomic weight of 69, which matches the mirror of the tetragrammaton 96. These right here play a huge role. And then zinc, of course, Jehovah equals 30. Zinc equals 30. That has an atomic weight of 65.38, which is 11.11. Really fascinating right there. So do we come up this chute and shoot down and then become animalistic inside hell, or earth as we call it? It's very possible. That's exactly how it works. Now the interesting part about that is, of this chart, Royal Society of Chemistry, is that these are all in groups. And what I mean by that here is the first group, the second group, the third group. Now, the group I'm talking about, which is in Daniel's interpretation of Nebuchadnezzar's dream, it just so happens to be in the 11th group, as in the number of magic. So again, we start off in the rhodogenium right here. We shoot up to the gold, the silver, the bronze, or brass, and then we make a dog leg left. And the interesting is, they're also in periods. First period, second period, third period, fourth period. And we're in the fourth period if we're interpreting this dream correctly. 11-4. And 4 is the building blocks, mason. The masons, they build squares. We're in the cube, the 4 corners of the earth, the cube. Everybody knows the cube that we're in. That's on the 4 level. That contains us. And I think that's why this has everything to do with the dream in Daniel's interpretation of that dream. And calcium is really where it's at. Because calcium, it has an atomic weight of 40. 40 is a massive number as well. 10, it's 10 times 4. Which is 40. 10 is the Wheel of Fortune card. 10 is the number in the Kabbalah. It's the last number in the Tree of Life. 9, and then 10 is the ending of it. And then, of course, there's 4 levels to that if you study the Kabbalah. So 40 is a massive number. And I think that's the very reason why we're stuck right here. We fuse into reality. This is the clay that we're made up of. This is the last piece. And this is kind of where, when they talk about the kingdom being destroyed and the stone hitting it, it's possible that this element right here, magnesium, the 24th element, as I mentioned to you, the word stone equals 24. It's possible that magnesium really is the stone that cracks and starts it all over again. It's just a theory of mine. It's a possibility. Again, I'm not saying it's true. What do you see? What do you see? But I see the group number 11. There's Daniel's dream. Gold, silver, brass, or copper, or bronze. Making that dog leg to the left, moving into iron, and then, of course, moving through all these elements. These are all important. Titanium. Titanium's massive. Again, titanium has an atomic weight of 47, which matches up with rhodogenium, which is the 111th element. All right? So, it has so much to do with this. You can play around with this and maybe decode a little bit further, but that's kind of what I see so far. What do you guys think? This is us in our animalistic state right here. Great allegory. Daniel being the sun card. Here's the stone, the death card. What do you see in all of this with this dream? But I can assure you this is real when it comes to breaking it down. The story may not be real, but the elements are real because we can measure those. So what do you think of this story? Well, that's all I got for today. My name is Logan. Thank you for watching. Until next time, have a great day or night.